So, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Social Z Franchise Happy Hour. I'm your host, as usual, Calvin Smith, coming from beautiful Destin, Florida. And this is our first episode in my new conference room. So, hopefully, the sound and everything comes out well. Excited to see how it does. But I'm very excited to have our guest this evening, Ron Taylor, who is coming from us from the largest city named Lima in the U.S. Ron, thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, Calvin. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, Ron, we're going to try a different approach today from our past episodes, and so we're going to try some rapid fire questions and some intervals here. So, to kick us off, tell us where you are and what are you reading or listening to currently to kind of promote self-development.
Interesting. Well, I am located in, like you said, North Lima, Ohio, which is actually a suburb of Youngstown, if you can actually say there are suburbs of Youngstown. I'm perfectly located between Pittsburgh and Cleveland. I'm like the midway point between the two cities, so it's nice to be able to access either one of those two cities. The book that I'm actually reading right now is called Plan for Growth, and it's all about building and starting your own franchise concept and everything that you do. Because while I am a franchisee for Edible Arrangements happily for going on 17 years, my wife and I are actually working on creating our own franchise concept that we hope to open the first location of in July, and then kind of see where it goes from there.
Awesome. Well, thanks. And it's Lima, not Lima, so I will get that right going in the future, Ron. So thanks for that. And you said plan for growth, and who's that written by, Ron? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, not off the top of my head. I would have to look at it, but it is a very intriguing book. I mean, being in franchising for so many years, a lot of it is kind of things that you already know, but it really does give you kind of some insights and some different thoughts of how you should build this from the ground up with a franchise focused type of brand. So, good to keep all those things in mind.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, you're experienced serial franchise owner and entrepreneur, and wanted to talk about your concept as well. But next question is, what is the franchise brand or brands that you currently own, and what makes that brand or your brand the best in its space?
Okay. Well, I am a current owner of Edible Arrangements. I've been an Edible Arrangements franchisee for 18 years, started or 17 years almost, going on multiple locations. I have 4 locations right now. I've had as many as 8 locations. So we've added, we've divested, we've done some different things. Our first location that is actually closest to us physically, it has been the busiest store in the franchise system for the last 2 years in a row, which we're very proud of here in Youngstown. I think a lot of people are surprised that the busiest store in the franchise system would be that. We have also been involved with the Simple Greek franchise, which is a Mediterranean fast casual franchise. We did that, and we actually ran the brand a little bit for Marcus Lemonis, who is a venture capitalist and the owner of Camping World. But then as far as Edible Arrangements is concerned, we fell in love with the products right away. And when you're talking about something that is a premier gift that you can send people for any occasion. A lot of our business comes from people that are out of town because they know that they can go to our website, they can call the store, they can get a really quality product sent. And I like to say that our product is a perfect conveyance of emotion, right? Whether it be a sympathy, whether it be a happy birthday, whether it be a good luck, get well, it is the conduit for the conveyance of emotion from the customer to the recipient, and Edible Arrangements does that better than anybody else.
Next question we have for you is, where did you grow up, and what is your earliest memory of thinking about or starting to think about being an entrepreneur?
I grew up in a small town in southern West Virginia. The town is called Oak Hill. And at the 2 stoplights, right? I always thought about being in business pretty much from the first day that I could go to work, which was at age 12, because my dad was in business for himself. He owned restaurants, catering businesses, all independently owned and operated types of things. Never did any type of franchising. But he, I was washing dishes for him when I was 12 years old. By the time I was 18, I was running the catering business. By the time I was 20, I was running his restaurant. I was always in some sort of food service and kind of embroiled in the entrepreneurial world with my dad from as long as I can remember doing anything. So that's kind of how it all got started.
Sure, sure. Well, that's interesting. That brings us to our next question. And so you grew up in West Virginia, and you got your undergraduate in accounting at West Virginia, right? And then talk to us about what made you go into accounting, and then you kind of went to a totally different industry than what you grew up in with your dad, and talk to us about that as well.
I took accounting classes in high school, and I really liked them because it was always about solving problems, right? It was about putting together the puzzle. And I think as an entrepreneur, if you're not a problem solver, you're probably going to struggle. You have to be pretty comfortable being uncomfortable. So that never bothered me, right? I knew accounting was kind of a safe bet for me. I was able to go to West Virginia University on a scholarship, so it didn't really cost me anything to go to school, and I'm forever a mountaineer. So my son's actually in school there now. He's a sophomore at WVU, so it's kind of in the family, everything like that. And I did do a brief 9-month stint at Ernst and Young after I graduated because I thought that was what I was supposed to do, but that was incredibly boring. So I couldn't suit every day. I lasted 9 months doing that, and I went back to the food service industry. And from there I ended up working for my dad a little bit. Then I got a job at Cracker Barrel, which in my mind, if you ever want to learn how to run a restaurant and you don't know how to run it, just go get a job at Cracker Barrel. It's boot camp for the food service industry. And then just got back to what I felt more comfortable in, right? But my accounting background has served me well because as you can tell from episodes of Shark Tanks and things like that, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that don't know their numbers. That's fortunately never been a problem for me. I definitely know my numbers.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So after university, after Ernst Young, you went back and worked with your father, and talk to us about why you decided to buy a franchise, and then what was your due diligence process? Like, what did you go through before you bought your first one?
Well, Cracker Barrel was my first foray outside of working for my dad. I left that job and went to work for a convenience store chain in southern West Virginia called Little General. And Little General had 6 different food service concepts inside of their convenience stores, right? Arby's, Taco Bell, Steak Escape, Subway, Godfather's Pizza, and Baskin Robbins. So I've got all this exposure to these franchise brands because I was running all of the food service for the convenience store chain. So I really loved it, but there wasn't a lot of opportunity there. I actually took a job in the pharmaceutical industry, and the pharmaceutical industry ended up relocating me to Ohio. Like, that's how I ended up here. And my wife actually wanted to go back to work, but she wanted the freedom and flexibility of a schedule because we had little kids. So that's when we said, well, let's start a business. And I happened to be working with one of my sales reps, and he had an edible arrangements that he was taking to a doctor's office, and I got the brochure, and we were off and running. I mean, I went to Discovery Day, and it was a home run for me.
All right. And Ron, you mentioned, so you're working at the Little General store, and you're getting exposed to all these different franchises. You're seeing the opportunity. You're back, and then you went back to Ohio, and you mentioned your wife was looking for a new opportunity. So you decided to go into franchising. What's the first steps you take, and what's the process that ultimately ended up on your first brand?
Well, the first step was, we saw an edible arrangements, and we immediately liked the product, right? So I went and bought like 6 of them, brought them home, and reverse engineered them. We just started taking them apart, right? So I'm immediately trying to cost out what this thing is, like how much does it cost, and the evolution of the brand has happened, so tremendously. I mean, that was back when we were using bamboo skewers and we were using lettuce. Now we have a food safe foam and we have plastic skewers and all this stuff. So we break them down. I drive out to Connecticut with my dad to go to Discovery Day, and they're telling us about everything. And I remember a few like watershed moments in Discovery Day. Number one, I was like, hey, how much do you have in the product? And they said, we have about 21%. And I'm like, no, no, no. I mean the whole product, like the bag, the container, not, they're like, yeah, 21%.
That's
And I
great.
remember I'm in a room full of people that have no background in food, and they're like, they look at me and they go, "Is that good?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's really good." So, and
Yeah.
then the other thing they said is they'd never closed one at that juncture. They'd
Well,
never had a store closed. So there was like 500 units open. So, I
mhm.
mean, after that, it was kind of, full head of steam for us. Once we got back, we started looking for locations, and we signed our first franchise agreement, opened our first store November 30th, 2006.
Oh, awesome, awesome. And for those of us that are ignorant to the space, Ron, what is the average, cost of goods or cost of materials in that space?
I mean, in food, a lot of time you're looking at about 30%. I mean,
Okay.
like typically, like I mean, even Subway, right? That I was incredibly familiar with, and they were a beast, right? They were a great
Hmm.
brand for the convenience store chain I worked with. Their targeted cost of goods was 32.6.
Okay. So
Now,
significantly better. Yeah.
right. I mean, a lot of that stuff came in already ready, right? You weren't slicing it, and the opposite is true at edible arrangements, right? We don't have pre-cut pineapple. Like
Hmm.
we hand cut and handcraft a lot of that stuff. So the labor end is a little bit higher, but yeah, cost of goods 21, 22%. You're not going to see a lot of that in a food service franchise. That's rare.
Sure, sure. So you started in 2006, and you mentioned, the conversations with your wife, and then you also mentioned, you went to Discovery Day with your dad, which is awesome. Are both of them still involved in the businesses, or how's that look?
Well, my dad is now retired and living in Myrtle Beach and playing
Sure.
golf and
Good for
putting
him.
in his garden.
Yeah.
But no, my wife is incredibly involved. My wife is the heart and soul of the business. That she has the eye for what the stores are supposed to look like, what the products are supposed to look like. She's incredibly connected to the wonderful team of managers that we have. I mean, trust me, they make me look way smarter than I am on a daily basis. I have just some tremendous people that work for me. And like mentioned, our busiest store, which is in Youngstown, which is the busiest store in the franchise system. A lot of people say, "How do you have the busiest store in the franchise system in Youngstown, Ohio?" I have 5 employees in that store that have been with me for longer than 12 years.
Ron, so next question for you. Obviously, you had a background in accounting. You mentioned you kind of learned on the job through Cracker Barrel. You had some different experiences as you started your first franchise, 2006. Learned obviously that's a good mentor when your father. You had your wife involved. What were some of the biggest mistakes that you guys have made to date, and how did you learn and kind of overcome those? What are your top two or three mistakes over the past, going on 17 years now?
I think probably the toughest thing to do is always to put the right people in the right places, right? Like
Hmm.
it's funny, like when my managers hire people and they don't work out, and you can tell they're very apologetic. I always try to make them feel better by telling them that the poorest job of hiring in the history of the company was done by me. Like I've hired more bad fits
Hmm.
than anybody. Not bad people. All people they're good people. I just
Hmm.
don't. I can't all if I can't put the right person in the right place. That's 100% my fault, right? So
Right.
I would say that's probably the biggest mistake and the biggest challenge. And then as far as a couple things that we did with Edible, there were a couple times when we started doing well kind of right away with our first couple stores, and
Hmm.
we grew a little fast.
Sure.
And probably if I had it to do over again, we weathered it. It was fine. But I think I would have been maybe a little bit more judicious in deciding like how I was going to open stores and where I was going to put them. Just because you have to have the infrastructure of human beings and personnel, because you can't be everywhere. If you're going to be a
Right.
multi-unit franchise owner, you can't be everywhere. And you also, it was a struggle for me to get to perfect is the enemy of good.
Right.
Like we have such a perfectionist level mentality, and that serves us well in a lot of respects. But then sometimes it can hold you back a little bit, and it creates a lot of internal strife. And then the longer you do this, the more comfortable you get with, you can be a 9. You don't have to be a
Mm.
10 all the time. Yeah, a
Sure.
9 is really really good. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely. You mentioned the people piece and that being a challenge, and I think it is for everybody, especially as the labor markets change and swing back and forth.
Right.
What do you think you've learned, and what do you think you're doing really well around that now that you weren't doing 17 years ago?
I think we're more focused on the people and their individual development, right? Like
Sure.
now that we've got a business that is sustainable and we have some really good people in place, it frees me and Lori up to get away from an operations and get focused on the leaders of our stores and helping them develop leadership skills, right?
Hmm.
Just because they can skewer a strawberry or dip something in chocolate doesn't mean that they understand how do I manage two different personality styles. So
Right.
I mean, just recently we did a workshop with all of the managers and we taught them the platinum rule, right? So it was about treat others the way they want to be treated and
Hmm.
understanding like, are they a director? Are they a relator? Are they a socializer? Because you can't communicate to everybody the same. You have to adapt
Sure.
as the leader. You have to adapt your personality style. So as you get more comfortable in your operations and you have people that can execute those operations, it really gives you the time to focus on the development of the managers, knowing full well that some of that development may lead to them moving on to better opportunities. But quite frankly, we see that as part of our job is to develop
Sure.
people to outgrow us.
That's a great attitude, and it's hard to remember sometimes, especially when they become vital to your organization, right? Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Ron, you mentioned when we started that you and Lori were working on a new concept and a new brand. Tell us a little bit about that and where you at in that process.
Well, it's going to be a charcuterie board business,
Wow.
and the name of the company is going to be Boards to Gather. And
Good.
it was kind of a brainchild of ours, and we're very comfortable in the gifting space. We're very comfortable in the holiday-driven space, given our background with edible.
Sure.
We're building out the first store that we have right now, but I mean, we've been building the back end for a franchise concept for years, right? Just the mentality of it, not necessarily the nuts and bolts of it. Through my interactions with Marcus Lemonis and different people that I have a wealth of contacts, we're building out custom infrastructure on the technology side of things because to me, business today is not just about a great product. You have to have an outstanding technology component, or you just
Hmm.
will not be able to compete in that
Sure.
space. So we're building out a lot of proprietary technology. We're going to have built-in loyalty, so we won't have to use a third party like Punch. We really want to build it. I want to take everything that I know about franchising, right? Because I love 90% of what Edible Arrangements does, and I can't
Mhm.
stand 10% of it, right?
Sure.
So I'm trying to figure out what is that 10% and how do I change it so
Hmm.
that hopefully our franchisees love 97% of what we do and they only hate 3% of what we do because you're
Right.
not going to make everybody happy.
No.
So we're super excited about the products that we're coming together, the story and really just the mission behind it. A lot of sustainable products, compostable products, delivery vehicles that are all electric, like things that are friendly carbon footprints and really focused on giving people opportunities to start their own business at a low point of entry without like just having to be married to the business 24/7.
Sure. Sure. That's great, Ron. And when is the target sort of first store opening for four boards together? Like when should we expect to see that?
We should expect to see it probably sometime in July.
Okay.
As
Yeah.
we start to put the store together, we've got a lot of work kind of on the products and fine tuning there. But again, we want to get this thing off the ground with all the right pictures and all the right training tools and everything for potential franchisees to come on board. So again, kind of thinking that Covey style of let's begin with the end in mind. We're building one store, but we're really thinking about what's the 100th store going to look like, right?
Sure.
So footprints for a 1,200 square foot store, very easy build outs where we can get you all the materials and source them from specific vendors so that it's easy to do construction. Because, I mean, that's the thing most people don't know. I was fortunate. I grew up in business, like with my dad. I understand how to hire a contractor and an architect. Most people that start a franchise, they don't know how to drive a nail or run a
No.
screw into a drywall, right? They don't have any
Right.
idea, nor should they. That's why they're paying you a lot of money as the
Right.
franchisor to know that for them.
Hmm.
So, we're trying to do all those things in the very beginning. So when we get to that point and we attract somebody who's going to invest their life savings with us, that they can feel 100% confident that we're going to be there for them.
Yeah. Yeah. That Ron, that's exciting, and we're excited to see what you and Lori do with that, and hopefully when we talk next year, we're talking about the 100+ locations that you guys are already developing. So that's great.
That would require some staff.
Sure, sure, sure.
That might,
Got it.
if we're talking about 100 or so, I might be a little scared. I might be my beard will be a lot grayer if that's the case.
Sure, sure,
Yeah.
sure. Before we wrap up, Ron, you mentioned you're with your engagement at Simple Greek and dealing with Marcus Lemonis, and I've got to ask just because he's one of my favorite guys, and
Yeah.
my wife hates me that I watch so many reruns of The Prophet, like it's one of
Profit.
my
Nice.
favorite
Yeah.
my favorite things. But you got a good Marcus Lemonis story you can share with us, or your when
I
how you met
do.
him? Yeah.
I do. He made the trip out here, shortly after he tapped. It was funny because he calls me out of nowhere, and I'm literally 2 days removed from rotator cuff surgery.
Oh
So,
my goodness.
I mean, I'm on Percocet, right? I mean,
Sure.
and he calls me. And he asked me to take over operations of the entire Simple Greek brand. And I'm talking to him, and I get off the phone, and I'm like, man, I hope I didn't say anything really stupid, right? And then I just, having
Yeah.
2 days removed from shoulder surgery. But then he came out here, and my one of our coworkers was with us, and he toured the store, and we really started to talk about nuts and bolts. And the one of my coworkers who kind of she's our admin, like she knows where all the bodies are buried. I mean, she's genius. And she has a young son who was just awestruck by Marcus. And Marcus took 25 minutes out of his time to just sit down with this young man who was 13 years old at the time and answer all his questions and talk to him and do all
Sure.
these things. And those were, I knew I liked the guy kind of right from the get go. I mean, I'd had enough small interactions with him, but those are one of those moments where you're like, all right, I mean, he's a billionaire, he's on TV and everything like that. But the fact that he took 20 minutes out of his time
Sure.
to just sit down with this kid, it was like, this is a guy that I want to work with. Like, this is something that I want to be a part of.
Yeah, that is awesome. That is awesome. Well, Ron, it's been a pleasure. We want to be respectful of your time, so we'll wrap it up. But we hopefully we get to talk to you again and talk about boards together and where you and Lori are and that development sometime soon. And to wrap us up, what we're going to ask you to do is give us your elevator pitch, whether it's for whatever business you choose, whenever you're
Well, I
ready.
mean, I think the best thing for me to always talk about is what really got me started in my entrepreneurial career, and that's edible arrangements, right?
Sure.
It's interesting because it's been around about 20 plus years. I think sometimes some of the younger generation looks at it and like, oh no, that's what grandma buys somebody for a gift or
Hmm.
something like that. But we have worked so diligently in the last 3 or 4 years to diversify the portfolio of products that we have. We have a Tennessee cheesecake that is outstanding. We have
Wow.
cookies. We have brownies. We custom dip, we hand dip all the products in chocolate. We have wonderful toppings like hazelnut banana crunch. We have different sprinkles and things that we put that you can customize and build a product to give to somebody, and you can do it with just a minimal amount of stress, right? You can go to the website, you can place an order, you know it's going to get delivered that day or the next day. We take same day deliveries up till 4 o'clock. So when you're looking for a gift, whether it's just for thank you, just because, whatever the case may be, you're hard pressed to find anything that is really better at conveying that type of emotion to who it is you're sending it to than edible arrangements.
Awesome. And Ron, for your locations, where's the best way to find you guys? Is it on Instagram? Is it online? Where's the best way?
Edible.com, right? I
Hmm.
mean, we have a huge web presence. It's always, that it's kind of our bread and butter. I mean, we kind of pioneered e-commerce in this gifting space, and we own the last mile, right? Like, as opposed to some of the people that we compete with, it's not 2 day delivery or anything like that. It's you reach out to us before 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we can deliver it that day, or we can deliver it the next day for free. So it's hard to beat.
The perfect conveyance of emotion. I like that. And you sold me, Ron. I'm gonna start buying
Yeah.
these for all of our gifts for sure, for sure.
It's really something to see people like Valentine's Day, like I said, is our busiest day of the year, and to see how many people want that red berry in that chocolate on with that red box, and how it speaks to people on Valentine's Day. I'm a huge Blanchard fan, right? So I
Yeah.
always say like gung ho, right? Worthwhile work. So I'm always talking to my employees about like this is not just fruit on a stick. This is how somebody says I love you. This is how somebody says I'm sorry. This is how somebody says I'm sorry for your loss. Like that's important
Oh
work. It's
yeah.
important
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Ron, thanks again. It's been a pleasure. Hope we get to talk soon. And for anyone who's taken the time to listen to Ron's story this evening, we appreciate you and hope you join us on the next episode. Thanks.
Thanks, Calvin. Appreciate it.